Hello, it's John Rinaldi, and this is the 7 most commonly asked questions I get about ICS Defender. So, Rob, what's the first question?
How does the ICS Defender compare to MGuard and Ewon?
Oh gosh, I get this question all the time. MGuard and Ewon, and see, the thing is, those are great products. I mean, but they're good at what they do. The MGuard, um, and of course, everybody in the world has used the Ewon. I mean, the Ewon is really good for remote access. MGuard is kind of a protection system, and then there's other things that provide. There's all kinds of NAT devices you can find. So. I mean, all these devices are fine in themselves, but they don't give you the overall protected solution that you really need. So because none of them have DPI, deep packet inspection, where you actually look at the message contents and make sure that that this is what we want. So you could have a NAT and if you give somebody a NAT address to a PLC, they can do whatever they want. Somebody comes in on remote access with one of these other devices, they can do whatever they want. Somebody comes in with, MGuard doesn't do the deep packet inspection. So you have protection devices, you have remote access devices, you have NAT devices. None of them really provide all of the protection you need the way ICS Defender is. So an ICS Defender has remote access, it has NAT, it has all this other stuff in it, plus DPI. So it's a combination of all these devices in one. So it's really not comparable to these things at all.
I have a lot of IoT devices in my control system. How do I organize and protect those devices?
Okay, so you have a lot of IoT devices and how to get this. So that's an interesting question. So, if we think about, I always talk about you want to think of your control system as this, as this isolated entity, and you'd really like to have a moat around it so that nobody else can get in it. But of course, the control system needs to access the enterprise and the cloud and other things nowadays. Didn't used to before. But you also have a bunch of IoT devices, and you need to have, there's stuff in here that needs to talk, that's IoT stuff that needs to talk to this. So there's a couple of things we can do here. I'm coming up with a book with me and Gary Workman are writing a book together on how to design Ethernet IP control systems, and we talk about this very thing in there. So the idea is to separate all of your control kind of devices on one network, and you've got to have so that those things all communicate on that network. Now, if you have a device, and there's some things like Siemens, was the first one to come out with a motor drive that had 2 connections, one for control and one for IoT. So what you want to do is put those guys on a different network. So any IoT connection, you want to kind of subnet them together and not on the control, because you don't want to take any of the control bandwidth and use it for IoT. So however this works for you is you need to separate those 2 things out, even if it's the same device. Now to do that, and then to do that and to protect, you want to protect both of them, of course, because this device, if it has 2 connections, one of the control system and one of the IoT, if you're not protecting the IoT one, somebody can come in and hack into this device, and now they can get into the control system. So what you could do is you could put 2 ICS Defenders here, on one for the IoT system and one for the control system. That's one way to do it. Or you could have just one ICS Defender, and you could keep them separated within the ICS Defender, so that they would come in on 2 different ports. They would still use the same uplink port, so you'd have loss of bandwidth over here for your control messages, but maybe that's not important to you in your application. So there's a number of ways to do this, but the idea is separate control from IoT. What's the next question, Rob?
What is the typical organization for ICS Defender?
Okay, well, I guess when we talk about how you organize, this was something that I wondered about when I started first looking at ICS Defender. So in a plant, you're going to have IT routers. So this is going to be a router to a router. Well, these are actually connected to an area router. over high-speed fiber, and then you've got a bunch of routers connected to that, to these area routers, and the area router then is connected to a big trunk line for the whole plant or whatever. So this can get really sophisticated depending on how big the plant is. But generally, you're going to want to connect the ICS Defender to a router and then to a control system. Now, this could be simple as, say, the packaging section of a machine. So you might have an ICS Defender for the converting part. You may have another ICS Defender for the packaging part. So you could have, because you're going to have different control systems for the different parts of the machine. So it's a hard question to ask because everybody's got different kind of machine environments that are organized differently. But you put an ICS Defender in front of whatever control network you want to protect. And then you make sure, as I always talk about in my other videos, you only have one connection out of that control system that goes up to the uplink. And that's the one that you're going to protect, and be very careful with, and make sure that nobody's coming through there that shouldn't come through there. So that's the kind of a question about that. What's the next question, Rob?
I see connecting manufacturing PCs directly to my IT routers as a problem. IT will update them and reboot them at random times. How do I handle that?
Okay, so we're talking about PCs on the factory floor. So we're talking about Windows PCs. So, the thing about that is we know that this is what, there's people all over the world that know how to break into Windows. That's all they're doing is figuring out how to hack into Windows computers. Not a good idea, I think, to put them directly in the control system. The control system should be separate from any Windows PC that are needed to operate things in the control system. The reason for that is because these applications then can be controlled. So if somebody hacks into this Windows computer, they can actually, the ICS Defender can stop them from doing things that they don't normally do. Now the problem is that, the advantage here is now IT can manage this. So all the authentication, the authorizations can all come using your standard corporate IT kinds of things. IT will upgrade the software and make sure it's got the advanced cybersecurity that all of your other Windows PCs do. The problem is, the downside of that, of course, and I admit that, is that IT tends to come and update these things whenever it feels like. Even if it's 2 in the morning, if you're running production, they might upgrade this Windows PC and reboot it and take your control system down. So there's a plus side and a minus side for doing this. So I'd say, so you're going to have an agreement with IT that there's certain Windows PCs that they're not going to update except at certain times when it's going to be advantageous to you. If you can get IT to agree with that, taking these Windows PCs out of the control system environment so that anybody who uses them is going to have to go through the ICS Defender, and then you're going to be protected so that no matter what, they're only going to be able to do what you authorize them to do. So that's really the reason for taking them out of there, and doing the same thing, with other PCs that might be used on the factory floor. Plus, we don't want any USB ports. We don't want any of the other stuff. So it's really good to move the Windows PCs out of that manufacturing floor. Rob, what's the next question?
How do I configure the ICS Defender?
Oh, configuration. Okay, that's an easy one. There is if I've got a video on say building NATs on the website. There is a really nice, easy to use IDE, a development environment for this. It's all very well done for you. There, for example, if you want to do a NATs, there's this advanced quick development thing to do NATs. So there's they've made it extremely easy. It isn't like configuring a router where you have to know all the special codes. This is just all menu driven, very quick and easy to do.
Is there a security issue with dual port devices?
Dual port devices. It seems like, I think I don't think there's any other kind of devices anymore. Everything now has a switch in it. And so it's got 2 ports, and then it's got the port that comes to the microprocessor. So, pretty much this is what everything has. And yeah, there certainly is. Now there's two ways you can configure these switches. These switches can be that it's just a standard switch, whatever comes in here goes out there, as any other switch would do. Or this is like two different networks, and each one of these has a different IP address. So you can do these two ways. Now, if you do it this way, and then this is getting connected somehow to your corporate IT or the cloud or the internet, then you've got the problem, and this one comes to your control system. You've got to do that protection that I talked about in the first question. So yeah, you got to be very careful with how you set up these dual port devices, because you can really screw yourself up and create security problems if you do this incorrectly.
Can I lock the configuration for ICS Defender?
Locking the configuration, yes. What happens there is once you have a configuration, there are you can define users and only with passwords, or so that only certain people can get in and change the configuration of ICS Defender. It's pretty good about that. You can also roll out the same configuration to lots of ICS Defenders. So if you had a standard set of things that you wanted to make sure that everyone rejected, you could do that, and then nobody else would be able to modify those that you've rolled out, say, from a central cybersecurity authority. Is that our last question, Rob? Okay, thank you very much. Thanks, I appreciate your time. Have a great day. As always, if you have any questions, I'm John Rinaldi. You've got my email address. You can contact me, give me a call, talk about your cybersecurity concerns. Have a great day.